to start off, just for those of you that have not attended these on a regular basis, unlike the panelists that we have on, is we always like to start the year off talking about hot topics and expected economic trends for 2023 or for the coming year. And so that's what we're going to talk about is what's going to be going on for small to mid-sized companies, what the general economic trends are, what are some hot topics that companies are going to be facing during 2023. And then we'll revisit this topic in June, halfway through the year, and say, okay, well, were we on? Is 2023 shaping out to the way that we thought it was going to? Is it not? Have things changed? What's going on? Do we have more of a status quo like we did between January and June of last year, or do we have a complete earth-changing shift like we had between January and June of 2020? Those were some very interesting conversations. So we will get the opportunity to follow up on these, but we just want to talk about some things that are going to be facing small to mid-sized businesses and talk a little bit about what our expectations are. So usually I like to start off these by going over a really great report that the NFIB puts out. And those of you that aren't familiar with the NFIB, they're the National Federation of Independent Businesses. They're a small business information, educational, and advocacy group. And they put out an excellent small business economic trends report on a monthly basis. And they've got several metrics that they track. And what we found, and we've been using their reports for the last 5 or 6 years as we've done these economic updates. And what we found is that these guys are pretty spot on. They survey 5,000 plus small to mid-sized companies across the United States, and they get some pretty good information. So we use their information as more up-to-date data on general economic trends, and then we whittle that down to the markets that our individual businesses are in. I would certainly encourage everybody on here to take a look at the NFIB reports that they put out. It's a small business economic trends report. It's available on their website. I would certainly recommend checking it out because it does give you some valuable information about just what's going on in general. So one of the biggest metrics that they track, and this is one we really pay close attention to, is their business optimism index. And I'll pose this question to the panelists. We already know the answer, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. But as far as optimism is concerned, let's explain for the group, where are we as far as optimism? Do we feel that optimism is increasing, decreasing, staying about the same? Is it high? Is it low? Is it where is it?
For us, it's up. We're very optimistic about 23 because you have no choice, and besides that, we really are.
Well, Shane, you guys have a lot of new business coming in, and you guys have a lot of other things to be optimistic about. So I think you're just where you see things going for 23 is driving a lot of your optimism.
I think that I found out yesterday. I think you're going to see that a lot, which doesn't affect us, but I think you're going to see a lot of people having to make changes. The electrical supply chain shortage is getting worse. I talked to one of the big engineers with Siemens, and there's only 4 manufacturers of a lot of the equipment that we use all over the country. If you are ordering switchgear for multifamily right now, your lead time is 90 weeks. 90. So, while multifamily has just been going crazy busy for the last 3 or 4 years, they're either going to have to slow down just so they can get electrical power to it, or they're going to stop building. And he said that there is no light at the end of the tunnel on this. Any commercial work over 800 amp services, you're going to get close to a year on deliveries. We're experiencing problems just getting meter cans. We talked about this in our CEO last week in Tomball, but we're thinking about ordering 10 of each and just save them because we can sell them. I had to buy one yesterday from a competitor for a competitor. I paid 3 times the value of it.
Yeah,
just so I can have it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, and I mean you'll pay 5 times the value of it to have some fabrication shop make it, just one off make it. But it really, I think it really illustrates the fact that we are going to, a lot of the problems that we had in 22, we are going to have in 23. I mean, there's no light at the end of the tunnel to supply chain shortages. Yes, things are getting easier. Yes, we have an egg shortage. We have a lettuce shortage. We have other food shortages. We have electrical equipment shortages, and they just seem to roll from different type of shortage to another type of shortage, just simply because what's been going on has really exposed all the kinks in our supply chain, and there's some that are still yet to be exposed, and there's still new things that will keep coming out. So I think it's certainly a situation where everybody's like, okay, well, what's next, and what are we going to have to deal with next? Even though we really should never be asking ourselves that question.
Prices seem to be. We just rebid last week. We rebid a almost $8 million project we bid in August. We went back and talked to every sub. The bottom line stayed the same. Some things went down, some things went up, but it was within 1% of $8 million from 6 months ago, which means prices are getting better. There's still going to be specific things, like the switchgear, but in the big picture, out of an $8 million job, that's $100,000 item. So that's really, it's a critical path supply chain item, but financially it's not the end of the world if that goes up 2 or 3%. But as far as metal buildings, rebar, those are coming down. Lumber is stabilized. Concrete, we think we pretty well leveled off at the 140 mark, which looks like it'll stay for a while. So pricing, with the exception of the interest rate being high, your bottom line is still remaining the same, relatively close in construction. So for me, that's very optimistic, because we got clients asking that question, and we're going to tell them the truth whether they want to hear it or not. So it is what it is.
Yeah, sure. And you were mentioning multifamily construction. I mean, there's a lot of demand for that since increases in interest rates have slowed down the housing market, single family housing market. People aren't buying anymore and they're renting, and rent prices have been very, very high in most markets. Now you're talking about the potential of projects getting put off, so there's not going to be more supply of multifamily housing, and then now you're going to continue to see rents go up, and then people are going to continue to get pressure put on it.
Is there, I'm just curious, in other parts of Texas and the country, there's a trend now, it's been going on for about 2 years. These big developers are putting in subdivisions that are only rent houses, which is a whole new, like Clay Development. I forgot who the other big one is. And they're renting those things out as fast as they can build them because people can't afford a new home yet. It's kind of their transition, but instead of renting an apartment, they're renting a house. Mm-hmm. Is that popular anywhere else in Texas? Have y'all heard of it?
I mean, are you guys hearing about that out in West Texas?
No, sir, I haven't.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like maybe an opportunity.
Well, Shane, I mean, maybe it is an opportunity, and maybe that's these home builders adjusting to the market. I mean, I know that people are turned off on getting loans because of the increases in interest rates, and so we're going to build it. So are we going to let it sit there, or are we going to rent it? So that wouldn't surprise me. And it would not surprise me also is that when and if interest rates come back down, that they say, okay, well now we're going to start giving people the opportunity to go ahead and start purchasing these things and get out of them. I think that's probably an adjustment of the market, and I mean, it makes sense.
What I have seen around here is a lot of small investors or personal investors buying up properties for rental.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, are they trying to get ahead of that law that's going into effect, or is it, which I think is kind of crazy, the new law that they've been protesting this week from certain countries, you can't buy land in Texas. Have y'all seen that on the news?
Mm-hmm.
No, sir.
That's been a big deal in Houston. There's been a lot of protests about it. If you're from, Taiwan, China, Japan, and Iraq, they're not allowing you to buy property now, or that's what the law apparently is in effect about, I think. Is that what you got out of it, Maurice?
Yeah,
I heard something about China, but I don't know about all those other countries.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I think it's been driven by Chinese individuals and companies have been coming in and buying up a lot of farmland, and they sparked a big issue when they bought up a bunch of farmland, I think by a military base, and so everybody has been
Yeah.
on that about that. But that's neither here nor there. Well, to get back to the optimism index. First and foremost, I think that us in our markets here in Texas, I think that we are certainly more optimistic than than people in the rest of the country. I mean, as far as the NFIB survey, their optimism index, it's going up slightly. It's at the historical 49-year, and they've been doing the survey for almost 59 years. 49-year average of that survey is 98. We're sitting at a 91.9. And we have been below the optimism index basically since 2020. So it makes sense why it dropped. It really hasn't gone back up, but I think that people are finding opportunities. I think companies that have made it through the COVID induced downturn are building back, but I think also that there's a lot of fatigue when it comes to the issues that we're having, because we're still having labor issues, and there's no end in sight. We're still having supply chain issues, and there's no end in sight. There's still volatility in the economy, and there's no end in sight. And we just really, I think business owners really do not feel like things are being done to speed up the solutions to these problems. I mean, basically, and we kind of knew this, and we talked about this in roundtables previously, but the market's going to have to work these things out. We're not going to get a magic bill from Congress that's going to fix all the problems. The market's going to have to work these things out. And these have been problems that have been a long time in the making, so they're going to be a long time in the fixing. It's just things were to the point where these issues weren't front and center in our minds. I mean, Shane, you've been coming to these for a long time. Jaime, you too. We've been talking about labor shortages since 2018. And labor shortages are going on far beyond that. We've been talking about, we've always known in the back of our mind that we were going to have supply chain issues with pushes towards more low cost global supply chains. Now it's here, and now we're having those issues, and those issues were a long time in the making, and they're unfortunately going to be a long time in the fixing. But we're just going to have to figure out ways to get around them. Couple of things what I'd like to get into now is talking a little bit about, we know things are going to be good in Texas. I think a lot of things, for those of us in Texas, I think a lot of things have been beneficial for us. I mean, obviously the oil and gas business is doing well. So, and that's going to continue in 23. So that's a boost for our economy. At least down here in Houston, we have the port and the maritime business, and the Port of Houston continues to grow as one of the largest ports in the country. So that has been beneficial in all the industries that support that. We've had a lot of manufacturing move to the state. So any recession that we're probably already in is going to, the effects I think are going to be muted for us. So that's why I think our optimism levels here in this state are a lot higher. I'd be interested to know if you go to some of the other states that aren't quite as big and don't have quite the economies of Texas, if they feel the same way. But I think that certainly with this upcoming recession, you've got a lot of different states that have a lot of different ideas on economic policy and social policy and a lot of differing views on how the state should be run. And I think you're certainly going to see a divide between states that economically do better and states economically that struggle. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But obviously optimism amongst this group and this group of panelists is certainly higher. Jaime, you guys are blowing and going out in Midland, and obviously Shane, you're having a good year. We're having a great start to the year. Rand, how are you guys looking out in Arizona?
Awesome. Pipeline's full, and I talked to part of a CEO group of marketing agency and advertising agency owners across the country, and everyone's pipeline is pretty full. People are just trying to hire right now, and the good news is that a lot of big tech overhired. So a lot of those people are coming back into our world. But 2023 so far has looked fantastic. We'll see how long it goes.
Yeah, well, we'll see. And see, there's that lack of optimism there. We'll see how long it goes. But I'll tell you something, Rand. That's something that we noticed with a lot of our clients, a lot of people that we converse with all over the place, is that people went out and they hired marketing firms. They had a little bit of surplus during COVID or from COVID, and they said, well, I need to go out and market my business. I mean, we're included, and we went out there. A lot of companies are going out there and spending some money on marketing. We've got some other people that we know that have marketing companies, and everything from just producing promotional materials to doing different things. Their business is growing rapidly. Lori, I know you guys are seeing a lot of that too.
We're seeing more turnover than we for any small business is scary. We'll see what, we can only, right?
Yeah, but there's a lot of demand for your services though. So you guys are certainly the opportunity to grow the business is certainly out there.
Definitely.
So yeah, but I think one thing I think, and I wish that they would add and figure out a way to track a resiliency index, because I think that people are cautiously optimistic about what's going on in the world. I mean, guys, let's face it, the doomsday clock is closer to midnight than it's ever been. Evidently, I don't know if y'all saw that article, but evidently we all have 90 seconds. Humanity has 90 seconds to live now, thanks to the doomsday clock. But I think that a lot of sentiment is there's so much stuff going on in the world, and we're approaching Armageddon and all these other things. And there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of negativity about things as a whole. But something that we see and something that we talk to a lot of people about is resiliency. And I think the level of resiliency is at a very, very high level. While optimism is not. And I think that pre-COVID, optimism was high because a lot of people liked what was going on with the economy and they liked the direction that things were going. So optimism was high, but I think resiliency was low, much lower than it is now. And then once we went through the COVID induced the shutdowns and the downturn, once we went through that and we got through it and we reevaluated our businesses and we looked at different things, it basically for a lot of people, this was worst case scenario. I mean, a lot of companies basically had to start over when it came to COVID and go back into startup mode. And that was something that you would never expect, even mature businesses doing. But we went through things that for a lot of us were worse than worst case scenarios that we'd anticipated. And we got through it. And so I think the level of resiliency is like, okay, well, you know what, 2023, bring it. And we're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to get through it. It doesn't matter, whatever comes our way, whatever the next shortage is, whatever the next geopolitical issue is, whatever comes down the pipeline, we're going to figure out a way to deal with it, because that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. So I would say that while optimism is lower and in some cases traditionally lower than in some cases lower than traditional levels, while optimism is lower, I think that resiliency is much higher. So I'd be interested to see if they could add a resiliency, some questions for a resiliency index to this. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just run over a couple of points. First of all, and this is an easy question for the group because we've all been posed it, but what is the number one issue facing businesses today? Come on, guys, this is an easy one. Shane.
Well, other than manpower.
Yeah, that's number 2 now.
Oh, it's not okay. I'm gonna guess financing.
Inflation.
Inflation. I don't worry about that.
In these roundtables, when you're in a class and the professor always says, you will see this again.
Yeah,
So the
you
next
told us
time-
this last week. I didn't want to
the
cheat.
next the next time I'm going to say you will see this again. So, but no, it's inflation has become the number one issue that's affecting businesses, and inflation affects basically every aspect of the business. It affects how you have to pay your employees. So wages need to go up, and small to mid-sized businesses have traditionally been raising wages because for a lot of different reasons, because they want to bring on better talent, because they need better talent, because of one single talented individual makes a much bigger difference with a smaller organization than it does a larger organization. But they've been willing to pay more for talent. They've had to compete against larger companies, so they've been willing to pay more in lieu of benefits and other things. So wage growth has been good with small businesses. But now it's getting to the point where that wage growth is not matching the growth in inflation. So you're getting pressure from your employees. Cost of benefits have certainly been going up. There are a lot of people complaining about cost of insurance. Hey, we've had a lot of natural disasters. We've had a lot of other things that have been going on, and that has caused insurance rates to go up. Don't try, heaven forbid. I literally know people that are moving out of the state of Louisiana because they can't afford to insure their houses anymore after 3 hurricanes and 4 tropical storms and floods and everything else that's been going on. So there are a lot of different issues related to cost. And even though we're seeing a lot of the cost of raw materials start to go down or start to stabilize, they're still high. And I think that this group would agree that not much is being done to correct inflation. I mean, inflation is not going to be corrected by monetary policy. Inflation is going to be corrected when supply chain shortages start to ease even more, and we get to the point where pricing has to become competitive again. Because, hey, if you can't get something, hey, I can charge whatever I want for it, basically. And I'm going to get that up to a certain point. But then once those supply chain shortages ease and we get to the point where now I have to start becoming more competitive on my prices in order to maintain market share. And that's eventually going to come, but there's nothing really that's been done significant that's going to create a significant amount of short-term easing on the supply chain issues that we're having. So I apologize, guys. Sun's come up. We were cloudy earlier, so we may go off for just a second and fix the sunlight issue in just a second. But why don't I just pose it to the panel real quick, guys? How is inflation affecting your businesses?
Well, on our end, I think people are shying out on spending money, even on repairing their vehicles. I mean,
Sure.
they can't afford it. And I mean, I've had people call me and ask me if I had credit, and I'm like, well, we take credit cards, and they're like, no, do you do credit? And I'm like, she was trying to get us to give them credit, but there's some companies out there that been calling us to actually give people credit. Like, they pay us, the company pays us, and they give people the money to pay it later. But I mean, I've had that issue for like maybe 5-6 years, and I tell them I don't want that service. I'd rather help the person just fix their car, in increments, just make it safe for them, instead of getting people in debt, because that's making things worse.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I think that is that's the natural solution to dealing with shortages of cash is expanding credit. And I mean, at the end of the day, you get paid, but what does it do for your long-term business? And certainly the issue that you have with credit is that obviously interest rates are going up, so borrowing money is much more expensive than it was even just a few months ago, and so you get into this never ending black hole, so to speak, where I need to spend more money, but I need to borrow more money to spend more money, and then I need to pay more money to borrow that money. And it's just a vicious cycle. And eventually it gets to the point where, okay, well, what do? I don't fix my car. I stop spending money in the economy because I just simply can't afford the cost to get access to that money. And I think that certainly, that type of mentality certainly illustrates something I think that's going to be very dangerous to businesses. If there's anything that's really going to cause a significant downturn in the economy, it's going to be that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that point once we talk about credit markets in short term, or as we get further along in this conversation. So, Shane, I know you mentioned you guys have seen a little bit of easing in pricing. It's a little bit, it's not significant. Are you guys really seeing a lot of people canceling or postponing projects because of cost?
No. Our phone has not stopped ringing.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing, and I think that also goes along with the capital spending trends that we've been seeing overall. So I think that is that's certainly indicative of what's been going on. It's been real interesting. I mean, capital spending has to jump ahead a little bit. Capital spending has remained high throughout this whole downturn through 2020 and the downturn and the recovery and everything. Capital spending has really not slowed down significantly. I mean, according to this survey, I mean, usually 50 to 60% of the company survey were making some type of capital expenditure. They were going out and they're buying equipment, they're expanding facilities, they're renovating facilities, they're buying furniture and fixtures. So they're buying vehicles, they're buying things that they need to grow their business. So it's really interesting because we're in a recessionary part of the cycle, but capital spending is not reacting accordingly. So maybe it's Shane, you think it's a pent up demand of projects from previously? I know these larger construction projects usually get planned a long time in advance. Do you think it's just a backup of those types of projects, or do you think it's something related to something else?
Everything that we've got or that we're working on is because people have outgrown their facility. In the medical world, it's just more people are getting sick and people are living longer. So that's just the way it is. But we are getting a few more clients who are paying cash right now and not dealing with loans. They just feel like this is a good time. And since prices have somewhat stabilized, they're probably jumping on it since we're not telling them it's going up every 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually happening to us. We're outgrowing our facility.
We've done work in Midland. We'll be there.
Okay. That'll work.
Hey, Shane, that's a good connection. I'm glad we made it.
There we go.
So, it's interesting the fact that that companies have been flushed with enough cash to pay for capital expenditures, and we'll hit a little bit of that when we talk about credit markets as we get down further some of these topics. I would like to hit a couple of last points on the NFIB report that I think were worth visiting. Obviously, we know labor markets remain a significant issue. Every time we have one of these roundtables, the labor conversation comes up. We know it's an issue. We'll dig down into that a little bit more. It's an issue, and it's a significant issue. It's not going away. A couple of points that I thought were very interesting is that the number of owners that are expecting better business conditions over the next 6 months is improving. It's actually improving. So people are actually getting to the point where they think that economic conditions or business conditions are going to be a little bit better. The only problem is it's gone up from June from a negative 61% to a negative 43%. So it is way in the red as far as that is concerned. And then the percentage of owners expecting higher real sales is improving slightly, but it's still underwater at a negative 8%. So optimism is at a low level. Expectations in a lot of cases are at a low level. But like I said, I think it's different for us. I think it's different for those of us that are doing business in the state of Texas, because obviously, and I think that's all of us in the panel, we are expecting that our businesses are going to grow. We're expecting that sales are going to go up. Shane, you guys are having a killer start to the year. We know that things are going to be getting better, and we're optimistic, and we're extremely resilient. So I think that sentiment is going to help. And getting back into the recession talk, and we've talked about this in a couple of the roundtables that we did this month, is that there is a tremendous psychological aspect to the economy. And if people feel like we're in a recession, we're going to be in a recession. Now, it's different things that drive people's mentality towards the economy. But this is one reason why I say that this small business optimism index that the NFIB puts out, I think is a better recession indicator than a lot of the other stuff that people look at. If businesses are not optimistic, and small to mid-sized companies make up the majority of our economy, and if those businesses are not optimistic, then we're heading into a recession, because they are going to start battening the hatches. They're going to start circling the wagons, and they're not going to be spending money. They're not going to be growing. They're not going to be doing the things that would typically drive better economic conditions. And so that like I said, that trend I think is one thing. Now, I think the optimism index, coupled with decreases in capital spending for small to mid-sized companies, I think is a really excellent leading indicator for a recession. But also, I think that economic conditions now are so unique, with so many unique challenges that we really haven't faced all at the same time, or really haven't faced in a way that we're facing them now, I think really makes this one sort of hard to call. Because there's so many different things going on, and so many new factors that we're facing. So let's talk about some hot topics. So we talked a little bit about inflation. What I'd like to talk about as it relates to inflation, or what are some of the things that we're doing to counter the effects of inflation? I'll pose that to the panel. Who wants to go?
I don't know that I do anything different, because I refuse to accept it.
Well, Shane, you ignore it, it goes away.
Well, you just keep doing what you've been doing, what you did through COVID. You keep pushing, you stay positive, and you keep going forward. You treat your customers with the best respect, and it's going to work out. I don't give a damn what comes out of Washington, D.C., even or a portion of what comes out of Austin. I mean, not that I dislike anything in my state, but I don't sit there and thrive on it. I mean, a lot of people do, and I don't have time. I'd rather be taking care of my client than sitting there boo-hooing over some BS bill I can't do a damn thing about that came out of Washington.
Yeah,
So
I would agree.
And go forward.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that, again, pre-COVID, we would always talk about what's the government doing and how that's going to affect us. And now post-COVID, I think we're saying, well, to heck with it. We can't control it. We can't do anything about it. So regardless, instead of being mad about it and complaining about it, let's figure out ways, some ways that can create opportunities. And certainly the inflationary situation creates opportunities. It puts a lot of pressure on us, but it certainly creates opportunities.
Well, I think the optimism, if you're optimistic and you keep that up, then you don't have time to worry about who's decided we're having inflation or a recession. Yeah, that's just my opinion. I mean, maybe I'm old school about it, but that's just the way I look at it. I don't want to hear about it. I want to move forward.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, your business and our business, we're not necessarily as subject to minute changes in prices and margins, such as a large retailer or somebody like that. So I think that shapes our perception on this, because we pay our employees well. Our employees are not complaining about the money that they're making. We haven't necessarily had to go up on prices significantly for our clients. We've been able to keep things pretty standard. We've been able to keep things pretty reasonable. And so, for us, it's just, for companies like ours, it's just not, not that it's not like it's the biggest thing that's affecting us. I think for us, it's more labor shortages than it is inflation. Jaime, what about you?
Well, I mean, we just have to be real careful. We still have to raise prices, of course.
Yes.
our employees need a little bit more money than before, but since most of them get paid for performance anyways, you still have to give them some kind of raise to level off.
Mhm.
My deal is just bringing in more work, and we were
Yep.
talking about that yesterday. I mean, that's basically what it's going to amount to. Just get more jobs to do, and keep that going. Of course, as far as the inflation part and trying to hire somebody new, the new people aren't going to understand that kind of stuff. They really just want to get in and get paid more than everybody else. So
Sure.
it's hard to hire somebody new with experience, that's not gonna that will accept the job at what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's why I think inflation is putting a lot of pressures on certain smaller businesses, just because the price hikes affect them a lot more. But I think really the biggest thing to take away from the inflation issues that we're having is that we all need to get better about managing our gross margins and tracking our gross margins and tracking our direct costs. I think that's become more important than ever for small to mid-sized businesses. I mean, we need to understand the transactions that our businesses conduct more thoroughly than we've needed to in the past. We need to pick through every aspect of that. And inflation is really in the inflationary situation, some of us more than others, but the inflationary situation is really forcing us to take a much harder look at that and say, okay, where am I really capturing my direct cost the way that I should be? Am I factoring in all of my direct costs? What margins do I need to make? Because obviously, overhead costs are certainly going up. So, what is an acceptable margin? Can I even track what an acceptable margin is? Do I even know what an acceptable margin is? Can I figure that out so that I know as I go out and I price my business and I manage my direct cost? Do I know how I need to basically run the business in order to be able to cover overhead and compensate for increased prices? So I think really the biggest takeaway is just to say, hey, I need to look at these things in my business a lot more carefully than I have been in the past, and I need to manage it on a more consistent basis.
I think that's a good point, and it's that's what we've been looking at. We try to look at the numbers all the time and see how much we're spending, see we're overspending. But I was looking at like one of our employees, he was kind of having some difficulties at home with finances, and I was looking at the other one that's making less and is not having difficulties. And I started talking to this guy that's having difficulties, and try to have some influence on him as far as his personal budgeting, because it's not too much of a problem of how much he's getting paid. It's what's happening to his money. And
Sure.
if he budgets, like the other guy, he'll do all right. And
Well,
He maybe was never trained on how to do a budget.
no, he wasn't.
So,
I mean, and my deal is to get him to learn those kind of things. And I was talking to him during the holidays and telling him, and you've got to learn more. If you want to earn more, you have to learn more. You have to just become a better technician per se. Learn more about what we're doing and educate yourself more so you can do more. And to me, learning more is like things get easier when you have more knowledge.
Yeah, work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
well, that's what we need to figure out. Now, it's a little conflicted with the entrepreneurial mentality, because the entrepreneurial mentality is not necessarily, okay, well, I'm going to scrimp and save every penny that I can save. I'm going to go out and make more money. So there's a little bit of conflict with that, and so I have to get good at making money. But let me pose a question. I mean, how many in our businesses do we have really formal budgets that we stick to when it comes to managing our overhead? I mean, how do we? Do we even do we track that? Do we track that closely?
Well, for us, because everything is job related, I mean,
Mhm.
we have a form that we fill out on all but our very small projects. And, you know, duration is the biggest deal. When a superintendent runs 2 weeks past his duration on a project, that costs us a lot of money.
Right.
So we've been trying to put in a week or two of, per se, insurance time on it, you know, because of weather. Like yesterday's event on the job I got down the street, I'm in the middle of dirt work. 5 inches of rain's going to lose. I'll lose a week.
That's right.
But my overhead on that project will not change. I'll lose a week of overhead. So you got to do that, but you still got to be realistic to the client. They can't pay for all your risk and you can't pay for them all. So, you know, you got to find a happy medium, but we do manage that. And we look at that seriously on every job, you know, because ours is broken down. I mean, office trailer rental, porta cans, small tools, printing. I mean, my partner and I looked at how much we spent on printing and paper last year.
Mhm.
You know, you're spending $15,000 a year for paper.
So
It's a good thing because you need that many drawings and you're going through that much paperwork, but can we do better?
So Shane, there's this little thing sitting in front of you called a computer that replaces paper.
I'm working on that. I just went over that in my weekly manpower this morning. My part-time military girl is going to start getting everything so that I can get rid of 100 boxes of records out in the shop. She's
Good.
going to start making sure, and we can start eliminating and trying to cut down on that. And that's all due to studying that budget. Where can we cut? If I can cut it to $10,000 in a year, I'd be tickled to death with that.
Yeah. Well, you know, cutting is one thing, but managing is another. And to really be able to go out and say that, okay, well, I need to spend some money on paper because I'm not going to go out and buy, you know, tough books for everybody that's out in the field necessarily and make that expenditure. But instead of spending $15,000 a year, maybe I need to spend $5,000 a year. And it's just a function of the business. But I need to be able to track how I am coming when it comes to am I meeting that? Am I exceeding it? Am I not meeting it? Maybe I've found some other ways and I can reduce that number. But it's certainly something that we need to be a lot more cognizant of. But really, personally, I mean, I think budgeting for overhead is one thing, but really the most important thing is calculating, understanding margins, and managing those direct costs, because that's really the stuff that really dictates how much money is coming into the business. And I think that out of this whole inflation thing, that is really the biggest thing that we need to get better at, and we need to understand that we need to get better at is managing those gross margins and understanding those gross margins.
Yep, that's what our CPA said.
That's a smart CPA. But I will tell you though, and we see a lot of this, and we get financial statements, and there's literally nothing on there where you would have typically cost of goods sold, which is typically your direct cost. I mean, cost of goods sold does not just apply to your cost of a physical widget that you go out and sell. I mean, cost of goods sold for us, it's the cost of our consultants. Shane, it's all the stuff that you talked about, your job cost. You know, Jaime, it's the time that you guys spend working on the shop, working on vehicles, and your cost of parts. You know, Rand, you're similar to us. It's your people's time that are spent generating revenue. And if you're not tracking that, and you're not saying, okay, well, the people that are going out and generating revenue for me that I'm paying that are a direct cost, if I'm not spending, if I'm spending a certain amount on that and I'm not charging enough over that to go out and cover any overhead that I have to have, what's the point? And if I'm not tracking that, and a lot of companies like, well, hey, my business is increasing, but I'm not making money. Well, have you looked at your margins? Have you developed the capability to look at your margins? I mean, a lot of very institutionally minded people will say, well, I don't sell a product, so I don't have a cost of goods sold. And that's not the truth. Cost of goods sold can be related to a lot of different things. So, all right, let's hit on a topic that I know we're going to talk a lot about, but the number 2 issue that's facing companies is labor market. So One thing about this wonderful NFIB report is that here are a couple of just, I would almost call staggering numbers, but 92% of those businesses, which is 54%, 92% of the businesses that are actually hiring, which is 54% of all the total survey respondents, are reporting few or no qualified applicants for the positions that they're trying to fill. But if I'm trying to hire, 92% of the people that are trying to hire cannot find qualified applicants. That, I think, alone is staggering. And I think that all of us that are trying to hire would agree that we're running into that issue. Do we?
For us, I mean, us personally, we're good right now. How we got around it is we hired a couple of part-time people, which got us solid. It's our subcontractors we're worried about. Enough electricians and plumbers and concrete finishers were fine. The wall is failing, so we're good there. But the licensed trades are still struggling.
Yeah, and I think they're going to continue to be, because there are not enough people going into those trades, and that is a whole nother conversation that we won't have time to get into today. We can talk a little bit more about it. We've got a couple of labor-related topics that we're going to talk about in the first half of this year. But I think that there's certainly there are societal aspects of that, there are political aspects of that, there are economic aspects of it. There are a lot of different aspects of that, and we could spend the next 10 hours debating those things. But I think it's the truth. Ironically though, for us, it's really not an issue. I mean, yes, things have tightened, and it's a little harder to find consultants with certain skill sets, but it's not undoable. It's not like we have an open position and we absolutely positively can't hire anybody for it. But it's going to change for us, because typically the people that work for us, they're older, they're getting closer to retirement age. And so one of the things that we have to work on over the course of the next 3 to 5 years is how do we replenish that group of consultants that we're ultimately going to lose, and how do we get people that have the right expertise and the right perspectives to do that. But Shane, what you were talking about is it's a creative solution, and what it all boils down to is that creativity is going to win the day. So the more creative we can get, the more we can, I hate the term, but I'm going to use it, the more we can think outside the box, the better off we're going to be when it comes to approaching these labor shortages. Because if it's not out there, you need to make it. If you can't make it in the short term, you need to compensate for it. And whether it's part-time people, whether it is outsourcing, whether it is bringing people back into the workforce that are that maybe were out but didn't want to come back in because there were certain stipulations of their jobs that they didn't like, that you can get around. I mean, whatever it is, we need to figure it out, and creativity is going to win the day. But I disagree that automation is going to fix this problem, because I hate to say it, Shane, in your business, Rand, in your business, Jaime, in your business, Lori, in your business, in my business, we cannot automate what people do. We can't send a robot out to consult for somebody. We don't have an algorithm that's going to look at your business. It will never exist. And there are people that create it. People will argue that it can be created, but the personal aspect of that, it is not going to change. And Shane, this may be like eventually where big robots do construction and things like that. But hey, guess what? Somebody's got to build the robot. Somebody's got to build a facility for the robot to be manufactured in. Somebody has to pull the raw materials out and transport them that the robot needs to be made with. So there's always going to be that personal situation. So I think it's very short-sighted to say that automation is going to solve all of these problems over time.
Yep, it'll never happen in my world.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not going to happen in my world either. I mean, I can't be McDonald's and put up a kiosk and you punch your things what you want on the kiosk, and then the robot flips the burger, and the conveyor goes down the conveyor belt and shows up on my plate. And I don't think that will ever happen with most other restaurants that just aren't churning out the same thing. So there's always going to be that human interaction. There's always going to be that human need. And really the solution to the labor shortages isn't automation. It is training people properly, training people and giving them the skills that they need to be successful in working the jobs that we have available out there.
Yeah, and Maurice, you talk about creativity, and I can't agree more. I've been thinking that this whole entire time, and I think it's rough to try and measure the future of the economy based on optimism when it comes to the fact that most people, we're in the hardware retail space, building supply space. Those are the people that we communicate with on a daily, and they're just trying to compare their numbers to 2018 and 2019 to try and come up with some trends. And they've thrown out 2020 to 2022 from what they're trying to figure out for forecasting. But they're being realistic, not optimistic, not necessarily pessimistic, just realistic. Instead of 25 or 50% year over year growth, now they're getting back down to 3 or 5%, and they're totally fine with that. And so I think that's fine. But when it comes to creativity, for me, especially for labor, it's just a matter of labor and clients both ways. It's a matter of providing value outside of just money. And I think you have to create that value in different ways. Jaime talked about it, educating somebody, giving somebody financial education as an employee might really help with retention, and it might help with, the overall happiness of everybody around them. And so that's a place people would want to work. And raises, everybody's given raises. We've given a lot of raises over the last couple of years, but we've started to create career path documents and ways to develop soft skills and all of these other things that are value outside of just money. And I think it's that creativity that's going to allow people to either thrive, or if they're rigid in that, they will not be around.
I agree 100%. And I think creativity is going to be paramount in all aspects of our businesses, because we are going to face and continue to face a lot of things that we've never faced before. And it's creativity from how you structure your business, creativity to how you manage your business, creativity in the way that you look at your finances, creativity in the way that you manage and inspire your employees, creativity in the way that your general perspective is on how you look at your business. And I think that that's one of the really incredible things that came out of these COVID downturns. Is it really forced us to change perspectives and look at our businesses in a different way. And like I said, Rand, I think that regardless of what the issue is, creativity is going to win the day.
Yeah, our theme, we just had our quarterly offsite, and it was going from fragile to agile. Mm-hmm. It's not there. We've all been in fear. We've all had, fear of the unknown. And so, everybody's kind of been locked in that. But right now we've got to get away from that fragility and get into being as flexible as possible. And then everything else will figure itself out.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just can't be rigid with the way that you approach things anymore. But the thing is that people are traditionally conditioned to think that the unknown is a bad thing. And the unknown is not necessarily a bad thing. The unknown is a chance to do something that hasn't been done before. Going into the unknown is a chance to do something that hasn't been done before. And really, honestly, it's a chance to do something heroic in your business, or at least heroic to your employees. I mean, to use that type of terminology and go down that path. But really, the unknown represents opportunity. I mean, people sailing off into the unknown, the early explorers sailing off into the unknown, that represented opportunity. I mean, the guys that strapped themselves on top of basically ballistic missiles and shot themselves into space, that was going into the unknown. But by going into the unknown, they created opportunities. And so the unknown is something I think that should be embraced. But I think that we've also been traditionally conditioned to think that the unknown was a bad thing, that we'd like to be able to predict what's going to happen, and we'd like to be able to know what's going to happen because it's a much more comfortable situation. But I think that we as business owners need to become much more comfortable with the notion that we are going to continuously have to face things that we're just not sure what we're going to have to do to face them.
Yeah, I think really embracing the unknown is key, but it's hard. We are conditioned, like you said, all the way through school. You either have a right answer or a wrong answer.
Yes.
Don't take guesses. That whole scientific, let's make a hypothesis and see if it's going to work. That's not necessarily encouraged. And so you either have a right answer or a wrong answer. You don't speak up at all. And so we're trying to get our whole team to try and just take good guesses. And then now we have forecasts, we have things we can measure, we can start to move forward.
Yes, absolutely.
Rand, you hit the perfect word right there. Measure. You can't manage what you can't measure. Period.
And we need to get better at doing that. And it's the best scientists will tell you that science is all about being wrong. So we go out, we make a hypothesis, and we shoot holes in that, and we figure out is that right or wrong. And we certainly need to do that within our businesses, because we tend to not shoot holes in things that we're dealing with our businesses. So next point I had on the list was supply chain. Jaime, Shane, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about what you guys are dealing with as far as continuing supply chain issues? Shane, if you want to elaborate a little bit more on the things that you were talking about before.
We're having to let clients know up front the as many of the unknowns as we can, just to be forthright with them. For a while it was the transformers for power. Now it's the CT can, which for those that don't know, the can is where your actual meter goes. And every one of those is different based on the amperage of your building, whether it's a house or an office. And the shortage on those is obviously ridiculous right now, because some of the smaller manufacturers went under during COVID and just couldn't come back out. Some of the electrical supplies, I don't mean light fixtures as much as the gear. It's the technical part of it. Other than that, we're just, it's a random thing here and there. Like I told you before, yarn was a delay. So we had to switch manufacturers for our cubicle curtains and the ORs. Little things like that. I mean, I've got 30 or 40 lock sets coming in, and there's one very, very small component about the size of a quarter that's stopping all of the hardware to get to my job site, because Schlage can't make it because it comes from overseas. So, little things like that, but you get a call every day or every other week of something unique that came up. And I think the best thing to do is, in our world, what we do is keep our clients conditioned for the unknown. Hey, this is what we know today. We're telling you the truth. We'll figure out a game plan and you move forward. I mean, you can't sit there and boo-hoo over it. You got to look for options on it. And again, tell the client the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. That's just all there is to it. Did we lose you, Maurice?
It's mostly chemicals right now. Actually, last week, the salesman for Advanced Auto Parts told us that they have a certain amount of like brake cleaners and brake fluid. And he said he was looking at his warehouses all around the US, and none of them have any, and everything they have it already in the stores, and they're not getting any input on whether or not they're going to refill those warehouses. But we have different suppliers, so I mean, I haven't heard nothing from the other suppliers, but we always keep about a month or two worth of those supplies. So I mean, even if they run out, we still have some, but I mean, that's only 1 or 2 months. Nobody knows what's going to happen after that.
Well, it's a surprise. And that's what, I don't know, if I could get all of my subcontractors and suppliers to be as open and say, hey, we think this is going to be an issue, or we think that's going to be an issue, it would help, because we only can tell the client. I got 1,000 foot of specialized base that got lost somewhere between here and the East Coast. been waiting 3 weeks for it. It's found out the owner had some excess in Dallas. It'll be here by noon today. Now they got to try and cancel this order. It's a critical, it doesn't seem like a lot, but on a welded floor, it's a critical path item. And welded is what you see in operating rooms and surgical clinics. So if you spill fluids, it's all the way up the base. That's actually a welded joint. It's welded with a rubber product so that, you know, you contain the fluids. It's just a sterile thing. Little things like that, you know, we deal with it every day, and it's, you know, it's like I tell them, nothing surprises me anymore. That's the beauty of it, is you just don't go into a conniption fit over it, you know, because you're used to it. It's very
Ain't
hard
that
for
the
me to say
truth?
that, but I'm saying it publicly.
Hey, ain't that the truth? But you know, I mean, when it comes to supply chains, it's going to take creativity. I mean, we're gonna have to figure out creative ways, and we're gonna have to figure out workarounds. I mean, you've already got a lot of companies that can't get certain raw materials, that they're retooling processes to use something else that's more readily available. You know, so sometimes you can do that, sometimes you can't. And one of the things I think that's going to be extremely important for a business of any size is going to be really digging down into their supply chains and looking at where the risk is, and not just where the specific risk of not getting something is, but also other risks, such as regulatory risk and different other things that could adversely affect your ability to get things. So sometimes you may have one supplier on something, but at least you know that there's that one supplier, and you can say, if something happens with this, what am I going to do? Can I find a way to compensate, or how am I going to handle it? At least come up with a game plan as best as possible on how you're going to approach that. But Shane, I think also the other thing is that what you say about being transparent. I mean, if you don't have something, you don't have something. But I think always previously the mentality is that, well, if I don't have something, I'm gonna push them off for a couple of weeks, and I'll tell them I'm doing this, or I'm doing that, or I'll make up some excuse just simply because I don't want to have to deal with it. But also, supply chain is robust enough that I can find an alternative without basically having to upset my client. But nowadays you can't do that. So just being honest and transparent, I think is certainly important.
Yeah,
Well, and
procrastinating needs to go away permanently.
The what?
Procrastinating.
Yeah, it never will.
And I think right now, a lot of our customers, they're being more understanding about that situation, because it's going on everywhere.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
is.
I would agree. I mean, guys, when it used to be, when we got bad service in a restaurant, we got really upset and we expected something. Nowadays, I'm like, okay, as long as it's not egregious, I'm okay. I'm still going to tip. I understand you guys are going through all this stuff. So I think we are a lot more understanding, just because we've been conditioned to be more understanding. And I think in some ways that's a good thing, but in some ways that's not a good thing, because we need to be understanding to a certain point. But at the end of the day, we also need to get things done.
Yeah, you got to find a happy medium there.
Yeah, we have to find a happy medium. We have to find a new happy medium with this. All right, so let's run down a few more topics. Got about another 20 minutes left. Cash flow and access to working capital. Does anybody on this call perceive having issues getting access to the working capital that they need to grow their business?
No.
No. Yeah. No. I think, Rand, do you disagree?
I just being a little bit I don't know, pessimistic, but we're going through a building acquisition right now, and unfortunately we went through the SBA to do it, and it's been a bear. So I wouldn't say that it's an obstacle. It is an obstacle, but it's not that we don't have the opportunity to borrow. So I feel fortunate in that sense, but man, has it been a struggle.
Well, I think
Rand, it's just not in Arizona. SBA, a lot of our clients go through SBA, and they're a little more challenging than they were pre-COVID, but at least they're still there. But you're right, they're a pain in the ass right now. I'm just being blunt. They are.
Yeah, we were trying to buy our building last year, and I mean, it was a big application, and we were kind of forced to do without the SBA due to time. we only had a time limit to buy our building. So we did away with the SBA, and the process went through faster.
Some of our local banks are telling us, if you got an SBA hang up, come to us and we'll work through it for you, which, you know, I've tried to tell these two clients that are really struggling with it, but I guess they're hard-headed, or they spent so much time filling out the 300 forms you're talking about that they don't want to just throw them in the trash.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I think I think everybody had very positive views, or in some cases positive views of the SBAs with all the COVID stimulus and stuff like that. But that honeymoon is over, and we're back to normal. I'm sorry we don't have any of the bankers on the panel that we usually do to talk about it. So we're getting a pure borrower point of view on how we feel about the SBA. But I guess maybe to rephrase my question is do we feel like we're going to have any outside of you having to jump through some extra hoops to get a loan, or paying a little bit more for a loan, or having to do something different? Do we think that we're going to have any significant issues accessing the working capital, or having the working capital available that we need to grow our business?
To be honest, we quit using the banks for line of credit. I mean, they were not the new bank we're using now, but another big one, Amegy, was just horrendous. They're terrible. So we're used for our line of credit is American Express. They own Cabbage. And you can, if I have a line of credit with them, and if I need money, it's as simple as me spending 3 minutes on the computer, and the next day it's in my account. It's that easy. The rates are fine. You can pay it off early. It's wonderful. And I don't have to jack with anybody and fill out a bunch of damn paperwork.
Sure.
So why not?
Well, it's opportunity. Now, we don't want to disparage our friends at Amegy too much.
Oh, I do.
But, well, you do, but but
I've been with them before they were Amegy here locally. So I've been with them since the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not the same bank when they were Klein Bank locally here in Tomball. Once
Well,
Amegy took over, they became that big bunch.
To that, I will say though that and we've seen this and we've heard this from a lot of our friends in banking, is that bankers have actually rose to the occasion. A lot of them have been pretty flexible in how they've approved loans over the course of the last couple of years. That was one question that we had coming out of COVID in general. It's like, hey, look, most companies are not going to have good financials for 2020. They're not going to have good financials for 2021. How are they going to renew lines of credit? How are they going to get loans? What are they going to do? And even in some cases, because and Jaime, you get people out in Midland know this very well. The downturn was starting before COVID. I mean, 2019 was a year where things were starting to head downhill in oil and gas. So a lot of companies didn't have good financials for 2019, and so there was a lot of things that were going on that were affecting how companies looked on paper. And I think a lot of banks did rise to the occasion and say, okay, well, we're not going to look at this. We're going to look at some other factors. So I think that was certainly helpful. But the moral of the story is that access to working capital does not seem like it's going to be a significant issue. And even getting back to the NFIB report, and talking about access to capital, is that there really weren't a lot of issues with that. Now, I mean, one thing that they did say is that only 2% of owners reporting that all their borrowing needs were met. Now, what does that say? Does it say that 98% can't borrow or have had difficulties borrowing? Does it mean that 98% didn't have loans? At least one thing that they did do is they added this in their survey, is that, okay, well, are you even interested in a loan? And 62% said no. So it could mean that they're is a big issue with companies accessing credit markets, it could mean there's not. Companies may not be interested in a loan, but they also their borrowing needs may not be met, but their borrowing needs may not be met for another multitude of reasons. So I think there's a lot into that. But at least in the conversations that we're having, and this is conversations in different markets with borrowers and with lenders, you're not really seeing a big disparity where people are saying, "Oh, well, it's so horrible to deal with the banks," and so on and so forth. So I think that is at least something that's fairly smoothed out. So the last big hot topic that I want to hit is capital markets, or capital spending. I'm sorry. And like I said before, capital spending has remained strong. I mean, you're looking at 55% right now. Reported capital outlays in the last 6 months. It's up 1 point from the last time they did this survey. They're spending on most people are spending on new equipment. That's gone up. Second most is acquisition of vehicles. Third most is expanding facilities, even though that's going down a little bit. The other metrics on those other things have gone up, but the expanded facilities have gone down. I can understand that's a lot of that is due because of supply chain and labor shortages in construction. So I could see that, but it wasn't down, but really significantly. And then last was, the next one was furniture and fixtures, and then actually land and buildings for expansion. And those were all unchanged or down slightly. 24% are still planning capital outlays in the next few months, and that's actually up very, very slightly. So I think it's interesting. I mean, out of all of us, I mean, Shane, I know you're the king of capital expenditures, but it's not capital expenditures on your part, it's capital expenditures on other people's parts. Jaime, I know you guys are planning expansion and planning to make some capital expenditures this year. Rand, you guys are moving to a new building, so you guys are planning capital expenditures. We are in some respects as it relates to equipment. So I think pretty much all of us here, just by the nature of how our businesses are growing, are planning some type of capital expenditure in the next 12 months. And honestly, I mean, a lot of the companies that we work with and a lot of companies that we talk to, they're doing the same thing. They're building new buildings, they're building new facilities, they're purchasing new equipment. So I think that's a very, very, very good sign. The only thing that I think is concerning about this is where this metric goes from here, because you're going to continue to have inflationary pressures. You're going to continue to have interest rate pressures, as in the cost, not the availability of being able to borrow money, but the cost of borrowing money is going to continue to go up this year. And so when does that reach a point where capital expenditures start to fall off a cliff? And companies still have cash right now because there's still some COVID stimulus out there. There's still ERCs that are getting paid out. I mean, I get 50,000 junk emails a day about people telling us that they're going to help us calculate our ERCs, which takes a whole of about 10 minutes in most cases. I mean, we did it for a couple of clients, didn't even charge them for it. But they say, yeah, and we'll take a portion of it, whatever it is they're doing. But that's still out there. Most of the other I mean, PPPs obviously run out. EIDLs have been gone for almost a year. So a lot of the COVID stimulus has gone away, but there's still some out there. So I think there's still some companies that have some cash and they're spending cash to make capital expenditures. There's still companies, they're companies that are not having any access or any problems accessing loans through a traditional way, but the cost is going up and it hasn't gone up to the point where it's prohibitive. But what I worry about, and even in the NFIB economists worry about, is that when do we reach a point where these other pressures start falling off a cliff? And we have to make capital expenditures to address a lot of the major issues that are affecting companies. So when does that slow down? I think when that slows down, or you start seeing a real trail off in the amount of companies that are making or planning capital expenditures, that is a giant road sign of rough times ahead.
Well, it's interesting, Maurice, you talk about that, and a lot of our clients, Ace Hardwares or lumber yards or building supply yards, those types of people, are taking all of the profits that they've made over the last few years, and they are putting it back into their facilities and expanding their facilities so they can increase the number of products that they offer, even offer whole new departments. And in doing so, for us, at least, we understand that we have this vertical that we've positioned ourselves with, because these people are a little less affected when it comes to recessions, because they have mandatory things that they sell, and they definitely were not affected. They were inversely affected by COVID. But we are thinking that now it's even better, because they're investing in their facilities, increase the number of products that they offer, hopefully become a more sustainable business long term, which means that we're going to have better retention long term. They're not going to have those highs and lows because they're reinvesting what they've just made. And so I don't know, we're actually more optimistic when it comes to the capital expenditures they're doing right now and how that's going to affect us long term.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that statement. And I would also say that I think it's certainly a function of or an indication of resiliency. Excuse me. Because what we have is optimism at basically historically low levels, but we still have strong capital spending. Excuse me, guys, got a little tickle in my throat. So two more things. We got about a little less than 10 minutes left. Two more questions I want to pose for the group. Question number one is, where do we feel our greatest opportunities are in 2023?
Probably in our world, a lot of it's going to be medical, and anything that supports public utilities. In other words, I'm working on drawings right now for a company that provides stuff to municipalities, lift stations, fire hydrants, all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the maintenance on all that's kind of gone by the wayside the last few years, and they're outgrowing their facilities. So between that and the medical, people are always getting sick, and technology changes. I've been to suites down in the medical center that I've changed 2 and 3 times over the last 30 years, because you do it, 5 years from now it's outdated, you go back and you redo it again. So that's where I think it is, at least in my world.
Yeah, I think so too. And first of all, aligning yourself with companies and industries that are basically always going to be there. I mean, they're going to have their ups and downs, but they're always going to be there. I mean, you could be building buildings for crypto trading companies, and so we'll see how that goes in the next couple.
Yeah, that's another subject.
Yeah, that's a whole nother subject. But you could be in industries that are highly dependent upon what goes on, and highly dependent upon economic conditions. And so I think that's something that represents an opportunity for us overall, is looking at the industries that we typically sell into, and finding applications of our products and services into industries that are going to be a little bit more stable. And I think that is all about an overall marketing plan, basically, and an overall strategy. And I don't think we've thought, I don't think a lot of people have necessarily thought a lot about specific industries that they target and how they target those industries. So I think that's a tremendous opportunity. Rand, Jaime, you guys want to throw anything out there as far as opportunities for 2023 are concerned?
Yeah, I think for us, I mean, here it's going to be the oil. I mean, it seems to be staying pretty steady. Just within last week, we've got like 21 trucks that a company just bought, brand new trucks. They lifted them up in the front, leveled them, aligned them. I mean, just within a week that they just bought, that are ready to go out on service out in the field. Well, those trucks will end up coming back for repairs probably within 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Are they Dodges?
No, these are Fords.
There you go. Same thing.
So we know where your loyalties lie, Shane. Laura, you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I'm looking for mine anyway. I'm looking more in the association, looking at different avenues to go down and see, put my face in front of different people than just people in the chamber and people in the general here.
Yeah, I would I would agree with that. I mean, I think that a big opportunity in 23 is just going to be able to find creative ways to take our businesses in places where it hasn't been before. A couple of things that were shared by the other groups where we did roundtables were, as far as opportunities were concerned, were number one, creativity, which we've talked ad nauseum about. There was also the resiliency and the mentality for charging forward. I mean, you know, guys, we're damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. I mean, we are not slowing down because there is the threat or the existence of a recession in this company. We're not slowing down because of that. And I think that one of the other things that came out of one of the roundtables is the notion of being intentional in what we do. And I guess there's really not much more to say about that, but you know, really being intentional in the way that we manage our businesses, the way that we manage our employees, the way that we approach our markets, the things that we do, and you know, really putting something behind what it is that we're doing, I think is a great opportunity. Where do we feel the risks are? Outside of labor shortages, supply chain, impending recession, nuclear war in Ukraine. I mean, what else do we think is, where do we think the risks are? What happens in Washington?
From what I've been hearing, you know, I've been hearing a lot of noise of, I mean, even inflation even going higher towards the end of the year due to supply issues.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly see that. I mean, I think that the risks are certainly, I think, pretty well known. And yes, there's a lot of uncertainty out there. I mean, we're seemingly going off into the great unknown when it comes to the economy. But I think that at least one thing that can be taken as a good thing is the risk out there. We know what a lot of those risks are, and we know where a lot of those risk areas are. You know, there is a threat of additional prohibitive regulation. There are continuing supply chain issues. There are continuing labor issues. You know, there is the issue of things that are being done politically that will create more roadblocks for certain things. So I think those risks are pretty much evident out there. Anything else we want to add to the group just about expectation? One thing that I do want to say is that one of the most important things that we can do right now in January 2023 is set the tone for the coming year. We've got the opportunity. 2023 is going to be what it is. We're charging forward, but we as leaders need to set the tone for the coming year. And we need to set the tone and maintain the tone, because it's all going to fall on our shoulders. And as we address these challenges, as we come across new issues, and as we charge forward really into the great unknown, the most important thing that we can do is be strong leaders and set the tone for our organization so that we can address whatever it is that comes up in the coming year. So anything else? Anything else anybody has to add since I jumped in there?
I feel like
optimistic.
Yep.
Optimistic. Let's go get them. Everybody put your hands in and say, go team. All right, well, guys, that's pretty much all I have for this one. Thank y'all for attending, and like I said, Rand, thanks to you and your group for helping us continue to put on this event, and we look forward to seeing everybody next month.